The transport ship Valkyrie's Dawn shuddered as another plasma blast tore through its hull. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen pressed herself against the bulkhead, feeling the vibrations of dying metal through her spine. Around her, the evacuation corridor filled with smoke and the screams of civilians trying to reach the escape pods. "Ma'am, we need to move." Petty Officer Rodriguez grabbed her arm, his face streaked with soot and blood. "The Kethvar boarding parties just breached Deck 7. Sarah looked down the corridor where families clutched their children. Elderly colonists stumbled on shaking legs and wounded soldiers leaned on makeshift crutches. These people had trusted Earth's promise of safe passage from the Outer Rim colonies. Now they were trapped in a metal coffin, light years from home, while alien predators hunted them through the corridors. The Kethvar had appeared without warning 3 days ago. Their bioships emerged from dark space like living nightmares, all chitinous armor and pulsing organic weapons. They didn't negotiate. They didn't demand surrender. They simply began harvesting humans like cattle, taking them alive for purposes too horrible to contemplate. "Rodriguez, get the civilians to Pod Bay 3, Sarah ordered, checking her sidearm. "I'm going to buy you time. Ma'am, you can't hold them off alone. The ship's Marines are already dead or scattered, I know." Sarah's voice carried the weight of command despite her exhaustion. "But I'm not just any Marine, sailor. I'm a SEAL." Before Rodriguez could protest further, the sound of tearing metal echoed from the junction ahead. Something massive punched through the emergency bulkhead like tissue paper. A Kethvar warrior squeezed through the breach, its six-limbed form moving with predatory grace. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, its exoskeleton gleamed with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with each heartbeat. Multiple eyes tracked independently, scanning for prey. Sarah stepped into the center of the corridor, drawing her pistol with practiced ease. The civilian evacuation continued behind her, but she blocked out their panicked voices. In her mind, she was back on the training grounds of Coronado, learning to become something more than human. The Kethvar warrior's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Its species had conquered dozens of worlds, harvesting sentient life wherever they found it. These soft pink creatures with their primitive kinetic weapons were just another crop to be gathered. Sarah fired 3 shots center mass. The round sparked off the creature's natural armor, barely scratching the surface. The warrior's head tilted, almost curious about this small human's defiance. "Right," Sarah muttered, ejecting the spent magazine. "Should have expected that." The Kethvar lunged forward with blinding speed, but Sarah was already moving. Years of training had taught her that sometimes the only way through was around. She dove to the side, rolling behind a support beam as razor-sharp claws gouged the deck where she'd been standing. Her mind raced through possibilities. Standard ammunition was useless against their armor, but every predator had weaknesses. She just had to find them while staying alive long enough to exploit them. The warrior's secondary arms extended, revealing bioplasma projectors that began to glow with deadly energy. Sarah sprinted toward the nearest maintenance access, bullets from pursuing Kethvar soldiers sparking off the walls around her. She could hear more of them entering the corridor behind the warrior, their clicking communications filling the air with alien menace. Inside the maintenance shaft, Sarah's training took over. She'd memorized the ship's schematics during the voyage, understanding that knowledge was just another weapon. Her fingers found the emergency toolkit mounted on the shaft wall, and she quickly assembled what she needed. The Kethvar were patient hunters, but they weren't used to prey that fought back intelligently. They expected humans to run in panic or cower in corners. They didn't expect a human to crawl through their ship's circulatory system like a virus seeking vital organs. Sarah emerged 3 sections down, behind their advance formation. The maintenance shaft had given her access to the ship's emergency systems. More importantly, it had given her access to the chemical storage, compartments that every human vessel carried for life support, emergencies. She mixed the compounds with the precision of someone who'd been trained to improvise explosives from household materials. The Kethvar might have superior technology, but they were still biological creatures, and biological creatures had weaknesses that chemistry could exploit. The first improvised gas grenade rolled into their midst without them understanding the threat. Kethvar warriors were apex predators on their homeworld, feared throughout the galaxy for their combat prowess. They didn't recognize the danger in a small cylinder that leaked colorless vapor. The chlorine gas mixture hit their respiratory systems like liquid fire. Their bioarmor, evolved to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, offered no protection against chemical attacks. Warriors that had never known fear began to writhe and convulse as their own biology turned against them. Sarah moved through the chaos like a wraith, her emergency respirator protecting her from her own weapon. She took their bioplasma rifles, learning their function through necessity and desperation. Every human had heard stories of Kethvar weapons that could melt through starship hulls. Now she held that power in her hands. The corridor became a battlefield where David faced Goliath with improvised slings and stones. Sarah used every surface as cover, every shadow as concealment. She turned their own hunting instincts against them, making them pursue her into prepared ambushes where chemistry and cunning trumped natural weaponry. But victory came with a price. As the last Kethvar warrior fell, Sarah felt something wet spreading across her side. Their claws had found her despite her best efforts, and her tactical vest was soaked with blood. Her legs trembled with exhaustion and blood loss, but she forced herself to keep moving. The evacuation corridor was eerily quiet when she returned. Pod Bay 3 showed green lights on the launch board, meaning Rodriguez had successfully evacuated the civilians. But the ship's damage reports painted a grim picture: main engines offline, life support failing, hull breaches in 12 sections. Sarah slumped against the bulkhead, pressing her hand against the wound in her side. Through the nearest viewport, she could see more Kethvar bioships moving to surround the crippled transport. They'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. Her comm unit crackled with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged spoke in broken English, clearly translated by alien technology. Human female, your resistance was unexpected. We offer terms for your surrender. Sarah looked at her blood-stained hands, then at the empty corridor where innocent people had fled for their lives. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet certainty of someone who had found their purpose. I'm not surrendering. I'm just getting started. The escape pod's emergency beacon pierced the void of space, broadcasting Sarah's location to anyone willing to listen. She floated in the cramped capsule, her makeshift bandages already soaked through with blood. The Kethvar bioship circled the wreckage of the Valkyrie's Dawn like carrion feeders, harvesting escape pods one by one. Sarah had launched herself in the opposite direction, using the dying transport's bulk to mask her heat signature. It was a desperate gamble that bought her maybe 6 hours before their sensors found her. 6 hours to figure out how one wounded human could strike back at an alien armada. Her pod's computer was limited, but it still contained the personnel files of every evacuated civilian. Rodriguez had been thorough in his evacuation manifest. 237 souls now drifted in scattered pods throughout the system, waiting for rescue that might never come, or worse, waiting for the Kethvar to collect them like specimens. The comm system sparked to life with intercepted transmissions. The Kethvar weren't trying to hide their communications, displaying the arrogance of predators who'd never encountered meaningful resistance. Their bioships pulsed with organic communication networks, sharing tactical data about human weaknesses and harvesting procedures. Sarah's training had included basic xenolinguistics, enough to recognize patterns in alien speech. The Kethvar used chemical markers combined with vocalizations, creating a complex language that their translation computers struggled to interpret. But repetition created patterns, and patterns could be broken. She began recording everything, building a database of their communications while nursing her wounds. The medical kit in her pod was basic but sufficient to keep her alive for now. More importantly, it contained stimulants that would keep her conscious despite blood loss. The first breakthrough came when she identified their designation for escape pods. The Kethvar word translated roughly as meat containers, confirming humanity's worst fears about their intentions. But their casual dismissal of human technology was about to become their weakness. Sarah began modifying her pod systems with the methodical precision of someone trained to turn anything into a weapon. The emergency flares became improvised missiles. The life support recyclers became chemical processing units. The communication array became something far more dangerous than its designers ever intended. Every escape pod carried an emergency artificial intelligence designed to maximize survival chances. Sarah began teaching her pod's AI about Kethvar communication protocols, feeding it patterns and frequencies until it could recognize their command structures. What she discovered made her blood run cold. The bioships weren't just harvesting humans randomly. They were following specific orders from something called the Flesh Architects, beings that apparently needed living human specimens for an upcoming biological project. The scale was staggering. They planned to harvest the entire outer rim, millions of human colonists for some purpose too alien to comprehend. But intelligence gathering was only the first step. Sarah needed weapons and her pod wasn't built for combat. That's when she remembered the debris field surrounding the transport wreckage. Hundreds of components drifted in the void, including pieces of human military technology that the Kethavar had ignored as irrelevant. She fired her pod's maneuvering thrusters, propelling herself toward a section of wreckage that had once been the transport's weapons array. The journey took precious time and fuel, but she reached the debris before the bioships noticed her movement. Floating among twisted metal and crystalline circuitry, she found what she'd hoped for. The transport had carried experimental railgun ammunition, projectiles designed to pierce alien armor through sheer kinetic force. Each round was magnetically contained in a housing no larger than a human thumb, but capable of accelerating to a significant fraction of light speed. The Kethavar bioarmor that had shrugged off conventional. Bullets would crumple like paper against relativistic projectiles. Sarah began the delicate process of cannibalizing her pod systems to create an improvised weapon. The escape pod's magnetic containment system, designed to hold emergency supplies in zero gravity, could be reconfigured to accelerate the railgun rounds. The power cells meant to sustain life support for days could be discharged in seconds to create devastating kinetic energy. Her hands shook as she worked, partly from blood loss and partly from the magnitude of what she was attempting. One mistake would turn her pod into expanding plasma, but the alternative was worse. She thought of the families in the other escape pods, waiting in the dark while aliens debated their fate like livestock. The improvised railgun took shape over several hours of meticulous engineering. It wasn't pretty, and it probably violated several laws of physics, but it would fire exactly once before destroying itself and everything around it. That single shot had to count. Sarah programmed her pod's AI to continue broadcasting false life signs after she was gone. The Kethavar would think they'd found another helpless human to add to their collection, right up until the moment her makeshift weapon turned one of their bioships into rapidly expanding debris. But as she prepared for her suicide run, something unexpected happened. Her communications array, still monitoring Kethavar transmissions, detected a new signal pattern. This one was human in origin, broadcasting on military frequencies that shouldn't have existed in this sector of space. The transmission was encoded in a format that made Sarah's heart race with recognition. It was a SEAL team identification code, one that meant only one thing: someone else was fighting back. The signal originated from the outer edge of the system, where long-range sensors were detecting something that looked like a small asteroid, but moved with unmistakably artificial purpose. Sarah's finger hesitated over the firing control for her improvised weapon. Her original plan would have taken out one bioship at the cost of her own life, a trade that might buy the other escape pods a few more hours. But if there were other humans out there, other fighters who hadn't given up, then maybe survival was possible after all. She changed course, burning her remaining fuel to reach the signal source. Her pod's sensors were damaged, but they still detected the massive shape hiding in the asteroid belt. It was definitely human construction, but unlike any ship design she recognized. The hull bristled with weapon arrays and sensor equipment that looked cobbled together from a dozen different technologies. The ship's answering hail came through clearly, spoken in accented English that carried the unmistakable tone of military authority. Unknown pod. This is Commander Maria Santos of the Resistance vessel Ghost Protocol. Identify yourself and prepare for emergency docking. We've been tracking the Kethavar harvest fleet and we're about to show these alien bastards what happens when you hunt humans. Sarah keyed her microphone with hands that no longer trembled. Her voice carried across the void with quiet determination. This is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, United Earth Navy SEALs. I have intelligence on enemy communication protocols and tactical weaknesses. Request permission to come aboard and join the fight. The response came back immediately, filled with grim satisfaction. Permission granted, Commander. Welcome to the war. The docking bay of the Ghost Protocol looked like a war museum that had collided with a scrapyard. Sarah's pod settled into the magnetic clamps while she stared through the viewport at an impossible collection of salvaged technology. Human military hardware sat alongside captured alien weapons. Jury-rigged together with the desperate ingenuity of people who refused to surrender. Commander Maria Santos met her at the airlock, and Sarah immediately understood why this woman commanded a resistance vessel. Santos moved with the controlled aggression of someone who'd survived multiple battles against impossible odds. Her left arm was a prosthetic that hummed with mechanical precision, and her eyes held the hard gleam of someone who'd seen too much death to fear her own. "Chen, good to have you aboard," Santos said, offering her organic hand in greeting. "Our medic needs to look at that wound before you bleed out on my deck." The ship's medical bay was a cramped space that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air. Dr. James Park, a former Earth Navy surgeon, worked on Sarah's injuries with practiced efficiency, while Santos briefed her on the situation. "We've been hunting Kithvar harvest fleets for 8 months, Santos explained, her voice carrying the weight of accumulated losses. "Started with just my ship and crew after they hit the Tau Ceti colonies. Now we've got 17 vessels and about 300 fighters spread across 6 systems. Sarah winced as Park cleaned her wound. "How many escape pods from the transport are still out there?" 212 confirmed, Santos replied grimly. "The Kethvar collected 25 pods before we could intervene. Those people are probably already being processed by their flesh architects." The term sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She'd heard it in the intercepted communications, but Santos spoke of it with the certainty of someone who'd seen the results firsthand. "What exactly are these flesh architects?" Sarah asked. Santos and Park exchanged a look that spoke of shared nightmares. Park finished sealing Sarah's wound before answering. "The Kethvar aren't the top of their food chain," he said quietly. "They're soldiers, workers, maybe even slaves to something else. The flesh architects are bioengineers that reshape living tissue like we work with metal and plastic. They're building something and they need human genetic material to complete it. Building what? We don't know," Santos admitted. "But whatever it is, it requires millions of humans. The harvest fleets have been hitting colonies throughout the Outer Rim, taking everyone alive. Earth's government thinks it's just random piracy. They have no idea what's really happening out here." Sarah absorbed this information while Park finished his work. The scope of the threat was staggering, but it also clarified her mission. This wasn't just about rescuing a few hundred civilians anymore. This was about stopping an alien project that could threaten all of humanity. "What's our tactical situation?" she asked. Santos activated a holographic display showing the current system. The Kethvar bioships formed a loose perimeter around the transport wreckage, systematically collecting escape pods while their main vessel processed the captured humans. 17 bioships, including one processor vessel that's 3 times the size of the others, Santos explained. "Our intelligence suggests the processor is where they prepare captured humans for transport to the flesh architects. If we're going to hit them, that's our primary target." Sarah studied the formation with a tactical eye trained in asymmetric warfare. The Kethvar ships moved in patterns that suggested they'd never faced organized resistance. Their formation was designed to prevent escape, not to repel attack. "They're not expecting us to fight back," she observed. "We can use that." "To a point," Santos agreed. "But Chen, you need to understand something. Every time we engage them, we lose people. Good people who signed up to save lives, not to die in suicide runs against overwhelming odds. I won't throw away lives on impossible missions." Sarah nodded, recognizing the burden of command that Santos carried. But she also saw something in the holographic display that the other woman might have missed. "Commander, what if it's not impossible? Your ships are built for hit-and-run tactics, right? Fast strikes and quick escapes? That's the only way we stay alive against their numbers." "Then we don't fight their fleet," Sarah said, her voice gaining confidence as the plan formed. "We turn their own tactics against them. The Kethvar are hunters, but they've never been hunted. They don't know how to defend against a predator that thinks like they do." She manipulated the holographic display, highlighting weak points in the alien formation. "Their bioships are organic, which means they have biological needs. They need to rest, to feed, to process waste. That processor vessel isn't just their command ship, it's their lifeline." Santos leaned forward, interest sparking in her eyes. "You're talking about targeting their infrastructure instead of their weapons." "Exactly. But first we need to speak their language." Sarah pulled up the communication protocols she'd decoded during her time in the escape pod. "I've been listening to their transmissions. They use biochemical markers for tactical communication, which means they're vulnerable to chemical warfare. Dr. Park looked up from his medical equipment. We have limited chemical weapons capability. Nothing that could penetrate their ship hulls. We don't need to penetrate their hulls, Sarah replied. We need to get inside their communication network. Every bioship is connected to the others through organic relays. If we can introduce the right toxins into their communications array, we can turn their greatest strength into a weapon against them. Santos was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. When she spoke, her voice carried the careful consideration of someone who'd learned to weigh lives against possibilities. It's insane, she said finally, but insane might be exactly what we need. What do you require? Access to your chemistry lab, a volunteer pilot with steady nerves, and the smallest ship in your fleet, Sarah replied. Also, I'll need someone who knows how to modify human technology to interface with alien biosystems. That would be Lieutenant Torres, Santos said. She's our tech specialist, former engineer from the orbital shipyards before the Kethvar hit her home station. Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the moment when a desperate plan crystallized into actual possibility. How long before the Kethvar finished processing those prisoners? Based on their previous operations, maybe 8 hours, Santos replied. Then we have 8 hours to teach them that humans are the wrong species to hunt. Santos activated the ship's communications array. All hands, this is the commander. Prepare for immediate tactical planning session. We're about to remind the Kethvar why Earth produced the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. As the crew responded to Santos's call, Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. But this time it came with something she hadn't felt since the attack began. Hope. The Kethvar might be superior in technology and numbers, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that humans would behave like prey instead of predators. That assumption was about to cost them everything. The chemistry lab aboard the Ghost Protocol buzzed with frantic activity as Sarah worked alongside Lieutenant Elena Torres to create something that had never existed before. A virus designed to infect alien biotechnology. Torres was a compact woman with grease-stained hands and the intense focus of someone who'd learned to rebuild civilization from spare parts. The Kethvar bioships use organic neural networks for communication, Torres explained, manipulating a holographic model of captured alien technology. Think of them as living computers, but with biological vulnerabilities we can exploit. Sarah studied the alien neural patterns while mixing compounds in the chemical synthesizer. Her improvised weapon on the escape pod had proven that Kethvar biology was susceptible to human chemistry. Now she was scaling up that concept to target their technology instead of their bodies. Their neural relays use bioelectrical impulses similar to human brain activity, she observed, but the chemical triggers are completely different. We need something that will disrupt their signal processing without killing the organisms outright. Why not kill them? Torres asked. Because dead bioships stop transmitting, Sarah replied. We want them to keep broadcasting while their systems malfunction. Turn their entire communication network into a weapon against itself. Dr. Park joined them in the lab, carrying sealed vials of compounds he'd synthesized from the ship's medical supplies. I've prepared the neurotoxin derivatives you requested. Fair warning. These are theoretical compounds based on xenobiological speculation. We have no idea what they'll actually do to Kethvar systems. That's what makes this fun, Sarah said with dark humor. She combined Park's compounds with her own chemical mixture, creating a cocktail that should theoretically cause cascading failures in organic neural networks. Torres, how do we deliver this into their communication array? Torres activated another holographic display showing the smallest ship in Santos's fleet. The Whisper was barely larger than a fighter craft, but it had been modified with stealth technology salvaged from a dozen different sources. We've installed quantum scramblers that can mask our energy signature for about 20 minutes, Torres explained. Long enough to get close to their processor vessel and deploy your chemical weapon into their bio-network. Who's piloting? Sarah asked. You are, came Santos's voice from the lab doorway. The commander entered with her prosthetic arm whirring softly. Chen, you're the only one who understands both their communication protocols and the chemical weapon you've created. This mission needs someone who can adapt if things go wrong. Sarah nodded, though privately she wondered if anything could go right with such an insane plan. What about the rest of the fleet? We'll be coordinating simultaneous strikes on their harvesting operations, Santos replied. While you're poisoning their communications, we'll be hitting their collection ships and extracting as many escape pods as possible. If your chemical weapon works, their coordination will collapse just when they need it most. The plan was elegantly simple in its desperation. Sarah would infiltrate the Kethvar formation alone, deploy the bioweapon into their primary communication hub, and escape during the resulting chaos while Santos's other ships rescued the captured civilians. It required perfect timing, flawless execution, and a significant amount of luck. 2 hours later, Sarah strapped herself into the pilot's seat of the Whisper. The ship's stealth systems hummed around her, creating a null field that should render her invisible to Kethvar sensors. The chemical weapon sat in a specially designed delivery pod, ready to interface with alien biotechnology in ways that Torres had only been able to guess at. Ghost protocol to Whisper. Santos's voice crackled through the comm system. You are clear for launch. Remember, 20 minutes of stealth, then you become visible to everything in the system. Understood, Sarah replied, firing the ship's nearly silent thrusters. Beginning approach to target. The Whisper slipped through space like a shadow, passing between bioships that pulsed with organic light. Sarah had studied their movement patterns during the planning session, learning to recognize the rhythms of alien predators. The Kethvar ships moved like a school of deep-sea creatures, following chemical trails and electrical signals that connected them in a living network. That network was about to become their weakness. The processor vessel loomed ahead, a massive organic structure that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a factory. Bioluminescent passages crisscrossed its hull, carrying information and nutrients to specialized chambers where captured humans were being prepared for transport. Sarah could see smaller vessels docking with the processor, delivering fresh prisoners from the escape pod collection. Her target was a cluster of neural relay structures near the processor's core. Torres had identified them as the primary communication hub for the entire Harvest fleet. If Sarah could inject her chemical weapon into those relays, the toxin would spread through the bionetwork like a virus through a computer system. The approach required threading between patrol ships that moved in lazy figures of 8 around the processor. Sarah had trained for insertion missions in hostile territory, but never against aliens who hunted by sensing bioelectrical activity. She kept her own life signs suppressed while following the gaps in their patrol pattern. 15 minutes into her approach, something unexpected happened. One of the patrol ships altered course, moving directly toward her position. Sarah's blood chilled as she realized the implications. Either her stealth had failed, or the Kethvar had detected something else entirely. The patrol ship passed within 50 meters of her position, its multiple sensory organs scanning the space around her. Sarah held her breath, knowing that any change in her ship's energy output could reveal her location. The alien vessel hung in space for long seconds before continuing its patrol route, but the near miss had cost her precious time. Sarah had less than 3 minutes of stealth remaining when she reached the processor vessel's hull. The neural relay cluster was exactly where Torres had predicted, a mass of organic conduits that pulsed with electrical activity. Sarah maneuvered the Whisper into position and prepared to deploy her chemical weapon. The delivery system was elegant in its simplicity. A micro-torpedo would penetrate the organic hull and inject the neurotoxin directly into the relay cluster. From there, the chemical would spread through the bio-network, causing system failures throughout the Harvest fleet. Sarah armed the weapon and locked onto her target. Her finger hovered over the firing control while she counted down the seconds until her stealth field collapsed. Everything depended on the next few moments. Whisper to Ghost Protocol. She whispered into her comm system. Beginning delivery run. Stand by for fireworks. She fired the micro-torpedo and immediately banked away from the processor vessel, pushing her engines to maximum output. Behind her, the chemical weapon penetrated the alien hull and began spreading through their bio-network. The effects were almost immediate. The processor vessel's bioluminescent patterns began flickering erratically. Communication signals between the Harvest ships became garbled and contradictory. What had been a coordinated fleet of predators suddenly became a collection of confused individuals trying to understand why their shared nervous system was malfunctioning. Santos's voice exploded through the comm system. It's working. Their formation is collapsing. All ships, begin rescue operations now. Sarah watched through her rear sensors as the Harvest fleet descended into chaos. Bioships collided with each other as their pilots received conflicting navigation data. The organized collection of escape pods ground to a halt as harvesting vessels lost contact with their command structure. But her celebration was premature. As the Whisper's stealth field finally collapsed, Sarah found herself visible to every Kethvar ship in the system. And despite their communication problems, they all seemed to understand one thing perfectly. The small human vessel was responsible for their current predicament. Ghost Protocol. I have multiple hostiles converging on my position, Sarah reported, diving toward the asteroid belt where Santos's ships were launching their rescue operation. The good news is that your chemical weapon works better than we hoped. The bad news is that they're really angry about it. Santos's response was characteristically direct. Then let's show them what angry humans can do when we work together. The asteroid belt erupted in violence as Santos's resistance fleet emerged from hiding. 17 human vessels, each one a unique hybrid of salvage technology and desperate innovation, struck at the confused Kethvar formation with coordinated precision. Sarah's chemical weapon had turned their greatest strength against them. But the aliens were adapting faster than anticipated. Sarah's whisper screamed through the debris field with 4 bioships in pursuit, their organic hulls pulsing with aggressive bioluminescence. The aliens might have lost their network coordination, but individual ships retained their deadly efficiency. Plasma bolts seared past her cockpit as she weaved between asteroids, using the rocky terrain to break line of sight. All rescue teams, report status, Santos commanded over the tactical frequency. Rescue 7 has secured 12 pods, came Lieutenant Morrison's voice from the salvage vessel. Defiant hope. Kethvar interference is heavy, but manageable. Rescue 4 here, reported Captain Kim aboard the converted freighter New Shanghai. We've got 23 pods loaded, but they're sending biofighters to intercept. Sarah listened to the reports while dodging through an asteroid cluster, her pursuers closing the distance despite her best efforts. The rescue operation was succeeding, but it was also drawing the attention of every functional Kethvar ship in the system. They might save the escape pod survivors, but the cost would be the entire resistance fleet. That's when Sarah noticed something odd about the bioships pursuing her. Their movement patterns were becoming increasingly erratic, not from communication problems but from something else entirely. The lead ship veered suddenly to avoid an asteroid it could have easily cleared, while another began firing at targets that didn't exist. Torres, are you monitoring the Kethvar biosignatures? Sarah asked, pulling her ship into a tight spiral around a spinning asteroid. Affirmative, Torres replied from the Ghost Protocol. I'm seeing massive fluctuations in their neural activity. Your chemical weapon isn't just disrupting communication, it's causing hallucinations and sensory distortions. Sarah felt a predatory smile cross her face. Then let's help them see things that aren't there. She activated the Whisper's electronic warfare suite, broadcasting false sensor readings that would normally be filtered out by Kethvar technology. But with their neural networks compromised, the bioships began responding to phantom targets and non-existent threats. The lead bioship suddenly broke off pursuit to engage what its sensors insisted was a human battlecruiser. The massive alien vessel opened fire on empty space while Sarah slipped away, leaving her pursuers to battle their own malfunctioning perceptions. Ghost Protocol, this is Chen, she reported. The chemical weapon is causing severe cognitive impairment in Kethvar pilots. We can use electronic warfare to exploit their hallucinations. Understood, Santos replied. All ships, activate your electronic countermeasures. Make them see an entire human fleet where there's only 17 ships. The battlefield transformed as human vessels began broadcasting false signatures throughout the asteroid belt. To the chemically compromised Kethvar, it appeared that hundreds of human ships had emerged from hiding. Bioships began firing at asteroids they perceived as enemy vessels, while others fled from threats that existed only in their poisoned sensory networks. But even in their confused state, some Kethvar commanders retained enough clarity to recognize the deception. The massive processor vessel, protected by multiple redundant neural networks, began coordinating a counterattack despite the chemical interference. Sarah watched through her sensors as the processor launched a new type of weapon she'd never seen before. Biopods streaked from the alien vessel, each one containing what appeared to be a Kethvar warrior in environmental armor. These boarding pods were targeting the human rescue ships intent on recapturing their prisoners through direct assault. All rescue vessels, you have incoming boarders, Sarah warned. Multiple biopods inbound to your positions. We see them, Santos replied grimly. Rescue teams prepare for hostile boarding actions. Fight for every life we've saved. Sarah banked toward the nearest rescue ship, the Defiant Hope, which was struggling to fend off 3 boarding pods while protecting its cargo of rescued civilians. The converted salvage vessel had limited defensive capabilities, relying more on speed and stealth than direct combat power. Morrison, this is Chen, Sarah called on the tactical frequency. I'm moving to assist. Can you give me a firing solution on those boarding pods? Negative, Morrison replied, his voice strained. They're too close to our hull. Any weapons fire risks breaching our cargo bay where the survivors are secured. Sarah studied the tactical situation through her targeting system. The boarding pods had already attached themselves to the Defiant Hope's hull, using biomechanical tendrils that pulsed with organic energy. Kethvar warriors would be cutting through the ship's armor within minutes, bringing their nightmare harvest directly to the people Sarah's team had fought to save. I have an idea, she announced, maneuvering the Whisper into a parallel course with the rescue vessel. But I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. Chen, whatever you're planning, Santos began. No time for explanations, Sarah interrupted, already implementing her desperate plan. Morrison, on my mark, I need you to vent atmosphere from sections 12 through 15. Make it look like a hull breach. That's where the survivors are secured, Morrison protested. Trust me, Sarah said, bringing her ship alongside the Defiant Hope so close that their hulls nearly touched. They'll be safe in their emergency suits. But the Kethvar won't expect what's coming next. The Whisper's cargo bay contained emergency supplies for extended operations, including the same chemical compounds Sarah had used to create her bioweapon. Working with desperate speed, she prepared a concentrated version of the neurotoxin while flying in formation with the larger vessel. Mark, she called. Morrison vented atmosphere from the specified sections, creating the appearance of catastrophic hull failure. The escaping air carried traces of human biosignatures that would mask Sarah's real plan from Kethvar sensors. Sarah opened her cargo bay and released a cloud of aerosolized neurotoxin into the vented atmosphere. The chemical compound mixed with the escaping air, creating an invisible weapon that drifted back toward the boarding pod still attached to the rescue ship's hull. The effect was immediate and devastating. Kethvar warriors that had been methodically cutting through the hull armor suddenly began convulsing as the neurotoxin entered their respiratory systems through their environmental suits' air recyclers. Within seconds, the boarding pods detached from the rescue vessel as their occupants lost the ability to coordinate their assault. Boarding threat neutralized, Morrison reported with amazement. Chen, how did you— Later, Sarah cut him off, already scanning for the next crisis. All rescue teams maintain your emergency procedures. We're not done yet. The tactical situation across the asteroid belt was evolving rapidly. Human electronic warfare had turned the Kethvar formation into chaos, but the processor vessel was adapting to the confusion. It began launching recovery ships to collect its disoriented biovessels, while simultaneously deploying a new wave of boarding pods toward every human vessel in the system. Ghost protocol to all ships, Santos commanded. The processor is trying to regroup their forces. We need to stop that recovery operation before they regain coordination. Sarah studied the massive alien vessel through her targeting sensors. The processor was the key to everything. The command center for the harvest operation, the prison holding captured humans, and the communication hub that coordinated the entire fleet. Destroying it would cripple the Kethvar operation, but it would also kill anyone still trapped inside its biochambers. Santos, I'm reading massive life sign concentrations inside that processor, she reported. There are hundreds of humans still alive in there. Then we extract them, Santos replied with the quiet determination of someone who'd never left anyone behind. All ships converge on the processor vessel. Prepare for the largest rescue operation we've ever attempted. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized the scope of what Santos was proposing. They weren't just going to attack the processor. They were going to board it, fight their way through an alien bioship crawling with Kethvar warriors, and extract hundreds of prisoners from the heart of enemy territory. It was suicide. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of mission that SEALs were trained for. Chen, I need you to lead the boarding operation, Santos continued. Your chemical weapons give us the best chance of neutralizing their internal defenses. Sarah looked at her fuel reserves. her ammunition status, and the massive alien vessel that loomed ahead like a living fortress. Everything rational told her this was a one-way mission, but rationality hadn't brought her this far. "Understood," she replied, already plotting an insertion course. "All boarding teams prepare for hostile entry. We're going to show the Kethvar what happens when you cage humans instead of killing them outright." The Whisper accelerated toward the processor vessel, followed by a dozen other ships carrying Santos's most experienced fighters. Behind them, the rescue operation continued as other vessels fought to save the escape pod survivors scattered throughout the system. Sarah's hands moved across her controls with the precision of someone who'd trained for this moment her entire life. The Kethvar had made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They'd assumed that humans were prey because they sometimes ran when threatened. They'd failed to understand that sometimes humans ran toward the danger instead of away from it. The interior of the Kethvar processor vessel was a nightmare of organic architecture and pulsing bioluminescence. Sarah led her boarding team through corridors that writhed with living tissue, following the heat signatures of captured humans deeper into the alien structure. The air tasted of copper and ozone, thick with alien pheromones that made her eyes water despite her environmental suit's filtration system. "Boarding Team Alpha, report," Santos's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by the bioship's organic interference. "We're inside," Sarah replied, motioning for her team to advance cautiously through a junction that branched in 3 directions. "The chemical weapon is still affecting their systems, but internal defenses are adapting faster than expected." Behind her, Lieutenant Torres carried a portable chemistry lab that let her synthesize new neurotoxin variants on the move. Dr. Park followed with medical supplies for the prisoners they hoped to rescue. The rest of the team consisted of Santos's most experienced fighters, each one a survivor of previous encounters with Kethvar forces. The processor's internal layout defied human logic. Passages curved and twisted in organic spirals, following the alien equivalent of circulatory and nervous systems rather than mechanical engineering principles. Heat signatures indicated that captured humans were being held in specialized chambers throughout the vessel, but reaching them required navigating a maze designed by an utterly alien intelligence. "Movement ahead," reported Sergeant Kim, the team's point man. "Multiple hostiles approaching from the main circulation passage." Sarah readied her weapon while Torres prepared another chemical deployment. The Kethvar warriors that rounded the corner moved with the disorienting gait of creatures affected by neurotoxin, but they were still deadly opponents. Their bioarmor had adapted to filter out most chemical attacks, forcing the boarding team to rely on conventional weapons and superior tactics. The firefight was brief, but vicious. Human kinetic weapons sparked against Kethvar bioarmor, while alien plasma bolts seared the organic walls around them. Sarah used the confusing architecture to her advantage, flanking the alien warriors through maintenance passages that their larger forms couldn't navigate. "Clear," she called as the last Kethvar warrior fell. "Torres, can you analyze their bioarmor adaptations?" Torres knelt beside one of the fallen aliens, her portable scanners analyzing the creature's defensive systems. "They're developing resistance to our current neurotoxin formula," she reported. "But I can modify the compound to target their new adaptations. Give me 2 minutes." While Torres worked, Sarah studied the processor's internal structure through her suit's sensors. The vessel was more than just a prison ship. It was a mobile laboratory where the Kethvar conducted experiments on captured species. The implications made her stomach turn. "Dr. Park, what are your readings on human life signs?" she asked. "I'm detecting approximately 400 humans distributed throughout the vessel," Park replied, his voice tight with professional concern. "But some of the biosignatures are altered. The Kethvar are doing something to them." Sarah felt ice forming in her veins. The flesh architects that the Kethvar served weren't just collecting humans. They were modifying them for some unknown purpose. Every minute they spent fighting through the ship was another minute that innocent people suffered unimaginable alterations. "Torres, we need that new compound now," she said. "Almost finished," Torres replied, mixing chemicals in her portable lab. "This version should cause complete neural shutdown in their current bioarmor variants." The team pressed deeper into the processor, following the strongest concentration of human life signs toward what appeared to be the vessel's core. The passages became increasingly hostile as they advanced. with biomechanical defenses that responded to their presence like an immune system attacking an infection. Sarah deployed Torres's new neurotoxin at every defensive node they encountered, watching alien systems convulse and fail as the chemical weapon evolved to match their adaptations. The Kethavar had superior technology, but human chemistry was proving more flexible than their biological engineering. They reached the first prison chamber after 20 minutes of fighting. Sarah's team breached the organic portal to find dozens of humans in various states of consciousness, connected to alien biomachines by organic tubes and neural interfaces. The sight was worse than anything she'd imagined. Medical assessment. Now, she ordered. Dr. Park moved among the prisoners with practiced efficiency, disconnecting alien interfaces and checking vital signs. They're alive but heavily sedated, he reported. The Kethavar are harvesting genetic material while keeping them unconscious. We can move them, but they'll need immediate medical attention. How many can we extract in one trip? Sarah asked. 43 in this chamber, Park replied. But there are 9 more chambers showing similar signatures. Sarah did the mathematics and felt her heart sink. 400 prisoners divided by their team's carrying capacity meant multiple trips through increasingly hostile territory. The Kethavar would adapt their defenses with each penetration, making subsequent rescues progressively more dangerous. Team leaders, report, she called on the tactical frequency. Boarding Team Beta has secured 2 chambers, came the reply from Commander Santos herself. 87 prisoners extracted, but we're taking heavy casualties from biomechanical defenses. Gamma Team here, reported Captain Liu. We've found the main processing center. Sarah, you need to see this. Sarah left Dr. Park to coordinate the prisoner extraction while she followed Gamma Team's beacon deeper into the processor. What she found in the central chamber made her question everything she thought she understood about the Kethavar. Threat. The processing center was a vast organic laboratory where captured humans were being systematically altered. But they weren't being killed or tortured. They were being improved. The flesh architects were using human genetic material to create hybrid organisms that combined human intelligence with Kethavar biological capabilities. They're making soldiers, Captain Liu observed, his voice filled with disgust and fascination. Human Kethavar hybrids with enhanced physical capabilities and retained human creativity. Sarah studied the biomechanical wombs where hybrid creatures were developing. Some were barely recognizable as having once been human, while others retained enough human features to be deeply disturbing. The scale of the operation suggested that millions of humans throughout the galaxy were destined for this fate. This isn't just invasion, she realized. It's transformation. They're not trying to destroy humanity. They're trying to absorb us into their species. The implications reframed everything. The Kethavar weren't simply alien predators harvesting humans like livestock. They were a hybrid species themselves, probably created by the flesh architects from other conquered civilizations. Humanity was being inducted into a galactic collective that had consumed countless species before them. But understanding the enemy's true purpose also revealed their weakness. The flesh architects required intact human genetic material and neural patterns to create successful hybrids. Damage either component, and their entire project became worthless. Torres, can you create a chemical compound that corrupts genetic material instead of destroying it? Sarah asked. Torres looked up from her analysis equipment with growing comprehension. You want to poison their entire project from the inside? Exactly. Make every human they've captured into a genetic dead end. Force them to start over while we organize Earth's real defenses. It's possible, Torres admitted, but the compound would be irreversible. Anyone affected would never be able to have children. Sarah felt the weight of the decision. They could save these 400 prisoners and escape to fight another day, or they could sacrifice the reproductive future of everyone aboard the processor to strike a blow that might cripple the flesh architect's plans for the entire human species. Chen, we need to evacuate now. Santos's voice cut through her contemplation. Kethavar reinforcements are converging on our position. Sarah looked at the hybrid development chambers, then at her team waiting for orders. The choice would define not just their mission, but the future of human resistance against an enemy that wanted to make them into something else entirely. Torres, synthesize the genetic corruption compound, she decided. We're not just rescuing prisoners today. We're declaring war on behalf of every human who refuses to become something else.